Yeah, good evening, everybody. It's nice to see everyone. Welcome back to Saving Our Speech, exploring the laws of Lashon Hara as they apply to today's day and age. This is going to be our last class of this series, and I hope you've enjoyed it. We've really, just to sort of go over the topics you explored already, we talked about the source of the prohibition of Lashon Hara and how there's really two ways of focusing on or emphasis. One point of emphasis is the damage caused or that can be caused by speech, ruining someone's reputation, ruining their livelihood, etc. The actual damage. And the other focus is not the damage per se, but the sort of character trait that it promotes, the sort of more internal decay that it promotes, focusing on the negative, speaking in a way that is harmful. And that's another focus. And there might be differences between those two. Next week, we talked about situations in which you are allowed to share what otherwise might be deemed Lashon Hara, situations when it's beneficial, the heter of to'eles, and, cases where either you're saving somebody else from harm, cases maybe where you're venting or things like that. We talked about the application of specifically that therapy and venting. We talked about shiduchim, dating, and when it might be appropriate to specifically intervene and say, I know you're going out with this person, but it's just important that you know this, and maybe being very careful, having due restraint, because it's very important not to do that too early or too late in the game. And then last week, we talked about accept the other side of the coin, which is not speaking or sharing, but accepting Lashon Hara, Kabbalah Lashon Hara, where we said that mainly the focus is not that you can't listen, although maybe it sometimes should be forbidden to listen, but generally you don't know what someone's going to say to you, but it's about what you do with the information, how you react to it. Does it impact the way that you act, that you will automatically conclude that the subject is a bad person, etc. And Kabbalah Lashon Hara means you can't really do that. You have to take things with a grain of salt. You have to analyze the facts. You have to be suspicious without jumping to conclusions, and certainly without sharing that information with the person themselves in a way that's harmful, or with any other people without really vetting. So that's sort of what we covered. Today, I want to take in a different direction, and that is to talk about potential remedies to avoid doing it, to avoid speaking or accepting the Lashon Hara. Meaning, there's really a lot of details here, but as Andrew just mentioned before we began our discussion, there's our very, very fine line between what should be permissible and what should not be permissible. And it's not so easy. And I hope over these weeks, you've sort of been thinking about the times in your life, like, should I have said that? Maybe I should not have said that. It's really not so easy to avoid speaking Lashon Hara. It's a really hard one. The Gemara itself says, Kulo b'Lashon Hara, everybody speaks Lashon Hara, or Avak Lashon Hara. We're talking all the time. We have relationships with people. We like to have a good time. We like to tell stories. And we like to share what's on our mind. And it's very challenging to avoid veering into the territory of Lashon Hara. So I don't have all the answers, certainly, but I wanted to spend a few minutes thinking together with you about how we might try to improve. And I think one thing to focus on is the thrust of everything we've been saying is Lashon Hara is more than a specific prohibition. Meaning, we have certain things we can't do, right? So you can't eat pig. It's very clear what that means. Eating pig. You can avoid eating pig. It's a specific act in a specific situation that you can't do. Lashon Hara is different. It's more of a general approach and philosophy. The prohibition against Lashon Hara is the philosophy of using words in a way that helps people and enhances relationships rather than the other way. And that's how we ought to use our words, and also how we ought to operate in our relationships. It's a general approach to life. And so it's going to obviously be a lot more challenging to write specific laws for, because it's always going to depend on the situation, the relationship, and the factors at hand. But I think just knowing that helps us to know that the way to try to improve in this area isn't just going to be about do this, do that, don't do that, but it's going to be about developing or emphasizing certain ways of thinking and certain behaviors and certain character traits. And so before we get to sort of the specifics or some of the specific things I wanted to talk about, I wanted to mention just a few general character traits that I think are very important in terms of being careful. So I think the first is self-awareness and humility. Self-awareness and humility, meaning often, when you're in the situation, say someone wrongs you and you feel bad about it, it's very helpful to be aware of the situation. You're about to say something, be aware that you're saying it from a place of hurt. You're saying it from a place of, this really bothered me, and that's impacting the way that I am reacting. And knowing that when you're hurt, it changes the way that you talk. And sometimes you make rash decisions. Or knowing that, you heard something about someone else and you want to share that information, but knowing that, well, I might not have done all the research I could have done, and I'm really just acting upon somebody else's report, and I don't know everything, right? Like being aware of what you know and what you don't know. Being aware of your motivations, being aware of why you're doing what you're doing, which leads to my second point of intentionality, right? A lot of, and this is actually something that's talked about a lot in teaching, which is intentionality means doing things purposefully rather than reactively. So a lot of times when we get into these situations, it's reactive. You see somebody trip on their face, right? And they fall, you're like, did you see what that guy did? Did you see how he fell? It's reactive. It's just like, oh, there's just this impulse inside of me to share this information. Let me do it. Intentionality means like, wait, let's think. Is this actually what I want to do? The words that we use, sometimes we just throw in sentences or words unnecessarily, and we do it naturally. So we're telling a story and we embellish. We didn't have to. We exaggerate. We throw in a few extra adjectives. So if, I don't know, the chazan was davening this morning, I don't know, you're like, how's the chazan davening? Oh my gosh, it was so long. The words so aren't necessary, but we throw them in naturally. That's not speaking with intentionality. That's just sort of letting words flow. And I think the antidote here is trying to be more intentional, definitely with the words that we use, but also generally. And all of this relates to thoughtfulness. Thoughtfulness means thinking about what we do before we do it. It's a very basic thing, but it is really very challenging. We're often impulsive and reactive and thinking like, is this what I actually want to do? What do I want to accomplish with the following conversation? What do I want to achieve by telling this story? What do I want to achieve by entering into this conversation, sharing this on my WhatsApp group, forwarding this email, listening to this video? What am I trying to accomplish? Being thoughtful is really the key, because I think most of us, if it's a situation where, say you find that you heard something funny about someone and you want to share it, if you think, well, I'm sharing this because I want to make the guy feel bad, I want to joke about him. No, I just think it's funny. But is that really what I want to accomplish? Is it worth it? So I just think these are three general, really important ways of general character traits that if we promote and work on will help us in this regard. And in that vein, I just wanted to note the Igeres HaRamban. The Ramban, obviously one of the big Rishonim Gedolei Masorah, he wrote a letter to his son, and he starts it off by saying to be very careful to speak slowly and in a low tone at all times. To all people at all times, to speak slowly and carefully. And he says that saves you from anger, and ultimately that will, if you speak slowly, that will lead and avoid anger. It will lead you to ultimately be more humble, and that leads to all sorts of great things, being aware of Hashem's presence and ultimately happiness. Speaking slowly, that very practically, speaking slowly helps us to think about what we say before we say it, and think about why we are saying what we're saying before we say it. So that very basic idea, that the focus on intentionality, thoughtfulness, being reflexive rather than reflective, I think can go a long way. I just wanted to say something. Alan had a comment before. I wanted to note what not to do. And that is that the Malbim makes this point. One of the most important psukim we have about this is something we say in every Shabbos. It says, L'chu banim shir muli yiras Hashem l'melchem. Right, David HaMelech says, come, my children, listen to me. I'm going to teach you yiras Hashem. Who is the person that desires life, who loves Zaves to see good? Guard your tongue from evil, and your lips from uttering trickery. Avoid evil and do good. Seek out peace and pursue it. So the Malbim learns it and makes the following comment. He says, you might think, and he says that he actually points out there are idolatrous priests or certain types of monks or like that have the following philosophy: to avoid evil and do good, I should just sort of leave society. Let me just stay away from everybody. Let me avoid people. Let me be a loner, and let me avoid all sorts of pleasures in this world, and then I'll be able to do good. And the Malbim says, no, that's not what we're asking of anybody. We want people to be me'urav mabrios, to be people, mixed up with people. That's what the literal translation, to be outgoing and to have relationships. We want all that. But what we need to do is to be successful is simply to have the sor meirav aseh tov, that notion. Is what I'm very basic, is what I'm saying tov or ra. And if it is ra, let me avoid it. If it is good, then let me share it. And that's and positive speech should be encouraged. Negative speech should not. Okay, that's the first point I wanted to mention. Do you want to say something, Alan?
Before there's an old joke.
Yeah.
When you fall down, when you're old and you fall down, they rush over to see if you're okay and pick you up.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
So that you will decide to do something that'll make you safer. If I bring something to your attention or potential danger,
right,
dealing with an individual, for example, okay, and you say, okay, I'm not going to deal with that individual, I'm going to deal with Mr. X or Mr. Y, and I'll be safe. And there's a danger associated with the other guy.
Right.
So if I say that, is that listening?
No. We've talked about this. No, it's not. And I think intentionality there is very important. And I want to get to this. Say to the person, I am telling you this because I want to make sure that you prick the appropriate treatment or doctor. And that's why I'm telling you this. When you preface it with that introduction, I think it changes the character of the whole conversation.
Even though you put down the person or the product or...
Right, because you're saying this is litoelet. I'm not saying this to disparage. That's not my intention. My intention is to help you, to make sure you get what you need. I think when you state that explicitly, it changes the whole character of the conversation, both from your perspective. Hopefully, then you'll be more careful if you are indeed, because look, you might say that, but then you might throw in some extra information. I understand what you're saying, but I'm just making a point. That even if, let's say I tell Andrew, right? Andrew, don't go to see Alan. He's the worst. Go to see Avraham, right? No, I didn't need to say Alan's the worst. I could have just focused on Avraham. I could just say, I heard that someone had a bad experience with Alan. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know Avraham is a great doctor. Like, the way that you say it matters. The adjectives you use matters. Not exaggerating. All those things matter. By saying, I am telling this so that you go where you're supposed to go, hopefully that will be helpful in keeping you on the right path. That would be my hope. Okay. But yeah, toilet is important. Okay. So now I just wanted to sort of get to more maybe practical specifics and things that you might do, although I think that is one. Stating your intention of the speech before you say it. I'm telling you this because X. I'm saying this because Y. Venting, right? Someone really hurt my feelings and it's really bothering me, and I just wanted to get your opinion. If you preface your statement with that introduction, it should change the character of your conversation. And if you're faithful to that purpose, then you can avoid the negative speech element. I think there are two types of Lashon Hara. There's offensive Lashon Hara and defensive Lashon Hara. What I mean by offensive Lashon Hara is almost like unprovoked, like the banana peel example, or the the example of say you go to shul, you see somebody do something, you don't like it, had nothing to do with you, didn't affect your life at all. You're not talking to the person at all, but you know what? There's something we enjoy sometimes about saying things we dislike about other people. And we enjoy it, and people like listening to us, and we feel good about it. Then they're listening to us, and we know we communicate that we know what we're talking about. We know what the daige was wrong. That's offensive lashon hara, right? So what would be the approach to deal with that, aside from everything we've discussed already? To me, the thing that stands out the most here is a statement in Pirkei Avos, which is Al tadin es chavercha ad shetagia lemakomo. Don't judge your two statements actually. One is don't judge your friend until you've been in their place, right? The point being and let me say it this way. What if it were you? What if it were you? If you were the guy that did that thing, put yourself in the guy's place. If you were the person that did that, whatever it was, how would you want people to talk about you? What would you expect from others in that situation? And this relates to the self-awareness, humility. All of us mess up sometimes. That happens. We all have made decisions that we regret. We've all done things we know weren't the best thing to do. We've said things we all know that we've all said things that weren't the best to say. Everybody's been in that situation. Most people don't go into a situation saying, I want to really mess up. Most people are I want to blow this, right? I want to really make a fool of myself. I really want to, get up there and give the worst speech in the world. That's my goal. I want to give a boring, irrelevant, inaudible speech. That's what I want to do, or whatever. I want to be a horrible Valkora. And no one's going up with that intention. And if you were that person who did this, whatever it was, whether it's the speech or the laning or the conversation or the birthday cake or the steak or whatever it was, it's very likely you would want people to understand that you were doing your best and you didn't mean to mess up, right? Put yourself in that person's shoes. What would I say? What I want people to say about me if I was that guy? I think it's just a very helpful way of framing things. And the other one, similarly, Dan Lakaf Zechut. Very basic. Dan Lakaf Zechut, trying to give the benefit of the doubt. You saw somebody do something. Okay, you don't exactly know what their motivations were, why they were in that state. Maybe the guy didn't get a good enough sleep last night. Maybe he was in a rush. Maybe he was put on the spot. Whatever it was, you don't know. Dan Lakaf Zechut. So that's in terms of offensive lashon hara. Then there is defensive lashon hara. Defensive lashon hara is when somebody does something bad to you, and you are really upset at the person, and you just have this desire to give it to them, whether it's and whether it's to them or to other people. So this again relates to the what I said before, which is the notion of stating your intention, knowing why you're doing what you're doing. I am saying this because this really hurt me. This really bothered me. So somebody did something to me. I just gotta get it off my chest. It's really bothering me. I just need to share it with you. When you say that, instead of the conversation becoming about giving it to this person, it becomes about helping me deal with the following problem that I am having, right? And that is a positive conversation. And that then could be permissible. And hopefully then that guides the way that you talk about it. And this conversation is not about, let me tell you all the horrible things this person did, but rather, let me tell you what I'm struggling with. Let's strategize to figure out how I might deal with it. And again, the Chafetz Chaim says there are many situations where sharing negative information is permissible, but you have to have the right intention, and you should state the correct intention. So that's just one general approach. And the other one, and I thought I would share to you what Chazal say. Chazal say that the rabbis say in, let me find the place here. The Maharal quotes it. Of course, I can't find it when I need to. What is they ask? How is somebody to repair them the ill that they've done if they spoke lashon hara, or how can they work on themselves? They give two recommendations. anava, humility, okay, and then and learning Torah. Okay, fine. So we could talk about why that is. I think the general point though is that a lot of times when we do speak out, it's because we feel that person put me down, and that makes me feel bad about myself. Like it really does. It makes me feel worse about myself. And now other people think badly about me, and that bothers me. And of course it bothers you. It would bother anybody. But I think one general approach to dealing with that issue is trying to have a self-sufficient sense of meaning. Meaning, the more that you're involved in your own mission to be the best person that you could be, the more that you're involved in doing chesed or learning Torah or davening or working for the community, and that's what your focus is. And the more that you derive meaning from that and have a sense of purpose and a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment from the things that you do, hopefully the less your feeling of self-worth will be contingent upon the opinion of others, right? So if someone said something and that really bothered you or hurt you or ruined your reputation, etc., and you want to lash out at them and say this, that's a very natural feeling. But if we can get to the point where, like, okay, they said that about me and I should rectify it, but I don't feel an impulsive need to respond, because ultimately what so-and-so said about me doesn't impact my own perspective and my own self-worth. I know that I'm involved in really important things. I'm involved in Torah. I'm involved in mitzvos. I'm involved in chesed. I'm involved in helping people. I'm involved in all those things. If someone else does X, that's not ultimately my concern, unless there's a practical thing that I can use to rectify the situation. So the more involved in our own avoda, our own mission and goals, the less we'll feel compelled to respond to the remarks or actions that other people do. And I think it's easier said than done, but the self-focus I think is so important, and just not just Rosh Hashanah, but generally in life. The more we get fulfillment out of the things that we do and we're focused on our own lives, the less other things will distract us and take away from our general sense of happiness. Just one more comment once we're talking about this in terms of tshuva from Lashon Hara. So obviously, if there's any very basic harm that we cause by saying something, then the best way one way to ask the tshuva is to rectify it, right? So if we said something, for instance, about Reuven to Shimon, and then Shimon was like, "Oh man, I don't want anything to do with Reuven." Certainly, if it wasn't true, we should say, "You know what, Shimon? I just want to say, I know I shared that with you about Reuven. I looked further into it, and I'm not sure it's true, and so I apologize to that. But like, please don't like jump to any conclusions. That or even if it is true, I just thought about it again, and I sort of exaggerated, and I really put it in a certain way, and I know Shimon didn't mean to, or whatever it was. So that practical impact is something that you can rectify. But there are times which you can't rectify it. And this is a very interesting, very famous machlokas between the Chafetz Chaim and Yisrael Salanter. It's very well known. The Chafetz Chaim says that, say the following. I think it's fascinating, but I think there's a big point there. Say you say something about someone that's really bad, and they don't know about it. They don't know that you share that information. So now you want to do tshuva. One aspect of tshuva is asking for forgiveness, right? So if you go to that person and say, "Hey, I'm really, really sorry, but I told everybody that you're a thief and a crook and a horrible person, and I want to apologize for that." So that's probably going to really bother them and hurt them. Be like, "You did? You said that about me? Oh my gosh, who else did you tell?" So you might do more harm than good by sharing it. So how do you react to the situation? The Chafetz Chaim says it depends on the following. If it's something that didn't actually cause any harm, meaning no one really listened or whatever, so then he says you don't have to necessarily say anything. But if it did cause harm, he says you have to apologize. Even if you know that it will make the situation worse, even if you know it's going to cause the guy pain, you have to say something. And okay. Oh, well, that's a good point. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says that he can't believe that. Now, it's not that he thinks, by the way, that it's okay to not ask for forgiveness. It's not okay. But he says you don't have the right to ask for forgiveness, meaning you don't have the right to seek atonement for yourself in a way that's going to insult other people. You don't have that right. Right? So, okay, you're looking to do tshuva. You said something about somebody else. They don't know about it right now. If you share it with them, it's going to really hurt. It's going to really bother them. It's going to be painful. Why should you choose to seek atonement by asking them for forgiveness on their expense of causing them great humiliation or pain? Just basically, you're going to have to deal with it and don't ask them. And Yisrael Salanter apparently refrained from giving an endorsement to the Chafetz Chaim, to his book, because of that one halacha inside of it. Fascinating. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? Be very careful. What should you do? Well, that's what I want to get to. Hold on. Okay. There is another interesting point to be made here, which is that in the Mishnah Berurah, in the laws of Yom Kippur, he says that when the Shulchan Aruch, again, the Mishnah Berurah was written by the same person as the Chafetz Chaim, or Yisrael Meir Kagan. So there shouldn't be contradictions. It does seem like there is a contradiction. And it's all from Rabbi Feldman, because the Mishnah Berurah says that on Erev Yom Kippur, when you ask forgiveness from people, you shouldn't ask forgiveness if it's going to embarrass the person. That seems to directly contradict what he writes in the Chafetz Chaim. So there are different ways people try to sort of reconcile these situations. One of them is, and I find this very compelling, does the person know about it or not? Meaning, if he knows someone said something really rotten about him, but he doesn't know who, then you got to go to him and say it was me. Because then he knows that he already knows, right? He already knows that the beans were spilled. Someone spilled the beans. So it's not going to humiliate him too much more. Now you just have to own up and say, that was me, that I said that, and I'm really sorry. Whereas if he doesn't know, then it might really hurt him even more, and maybe better that he just not know. Again, these situations are very difficult. The point being is that, just to give some sort of motivation, it is incredibly difficult to repair the sin of Lashon Hara. It is incredibly difficult to repent. It is a well-known story which goes that someone asked, Rabbi Feldman quotes the story, someone asked his rabbi how I should do tshuva for Lashon Hara. And he says, do like this: get a pillow and make a hole in it. He says, okay. He says, okay, and I'll run around the city with it. He's like, fine. And then, of course, he runs around the city and it goes all over the place. He says, okay, now gather all the feathers. Point being, there's almost no way to know what sort of impact your speech can have. And this person says it, and this person says, this person says it. What do? It's very difficult to repair afterward. It's almost impossible, which should scare us. So I think the way to do the best that we can is to identify the character traits which cause us to share Lashon Hara and try to work on those. Again, on our own humility, on knowing that as much as somebody else really messed up, we also mess up. And when we mess up, we don't want people to be judgmental about us. We want them to give us the benefit of the doubt. And we ought to do the same, being intentional about what we say and why we say it, and being thoughtful about the impact of our speech, trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, and also trying to derive a sense of meaning from the things that we're involved in, from the positivity that we're involved in. The notion of positivity, generally having a positive outlook, positive perspective, looking to see the good in people, looking to help people, looking to use our words to enhance relationships rather than the opposite. I think that general philosophy and orientation is not just the best way to avoid the ills of Lashon Hara, which again is incredibly difficult to do tshuva for, but also will make us happier in life in general. And again, that's what the pasuk says. Miha isha chafetz chaim. Who is the person that desires life? And the Maharal says, what makes us unique as humans, one of the things that makes us unique as humans is our ability to communicate, the power of speech. That's why famously when it says in the Torah that Hashem blew a living soul into Adam, the Aramaic translation of Unclus is a ruach mimalila, a talking spirit. That humans are defined by their ability to communicate with one another. It's an incredibly powerful force that we had that can be utilized for incredible good and incredible happiness. And that's what our motivation and goal ought to be, to use that koach hadibor to do amazing things, to enhance relationships, to compliment people, to build up people, to build up institutions, to build up groups, and to share in positive conversations. And if we do that and have the right thoughtfulness and humility and self-awareness, etc., hopefully that will help us desire life and see the good, and of course refrain from doing the opposite. So I'd like to thank you all for dealing with, for listening to me and enjoying me in this series. I hope it's provided some food for thought. I hope it's provided some room for reflection. I hope we can all keep on trying the best that we can to use our speech for good reasons and never for negative reasons. Thank you all.
The Rabbi, the survey company phoned you up and asked